It's hard and you can't get engaged, but when you can, it's really important that you do. All right, and there's a few other slides, and we're going to go through this quick.
Yeah.
These are comments I hear in my hometown, and I'm sure you hear them in your hometown. It's info from your village and your community. Tom is a civil engineer with a background in planning, design, construction, and supervision. This expertise has involved hydrology, water and sewer systems, energy conservation, environmental reviews, and permitting. And in order to have that kind of knowledge, he has to read, understand, and comply with rules, regulations, contracts, scopes of service, and he uses that experience in bringing his presentation to folks like you when he can. And with the regulations and all that other stuff, working for state government, it's a full-time job just trying to keep up on everything. So it's an amazing service to our community to have Tom here for us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take it out from underneath the table.
Well, I guess everybody can see me because I can see most everybody. Good afternoon, or maybe some of you consider this to be evening already. It's kind of hard to tell this time of year. Anyway, thank you all for coming to this meeting. And as Scott said, I plan to talk about two things: what is required in a town plan and how the proposed plan measures up to that, and also some wastewater items. And as Scott said, if I'm using terms you do not understand, please ask, but otherwise please hold your questions and comments until the discussion period. I'll begin my discussion by discussing the proposed town plan. Town plans are important. Zoning is based on the plan. Act 250's Criterion 10 requires conformance with the plan, and the Public Utilities Commission uses town plans in considering siting of electrical or telecommunications facilities. For example, if a town plan is specific about where solar arrays may be built, that makes it more likely that the Public Utilities Commission will deny permits for projects proposed outside those areas. The more specific the town plan is regarding where a certain development should be and what it should look like, the easier it is to create zoning bylaws to support that vision. And I believe Ed Stanek's presentation will include the importance of a town plan in Act 250. Now, Vermont statutes define what is required to be in a town plan and what is optional in a town plan. The first slide shows the required elements of a town plan, and some of the required elements I did not find in this proposed plan, and I'll discuss three of them and why they are important. The first is the future land use map, which the second is the location, amount, intensity, timing of development in relation to the provision of necessary community facilities, and a new requirement, consistency with the goals of the plan. And my first topic is the future land use map. The town plan contains a future land use map, which is the next slide. So, next slide, slide 2, please. The map is required to indicate areas proposed for many uses. A number of uses required to be indicated on the map are not shown. Those uses are listed in the lower right of the slide. Slides there, and probably my head's in the way of the lower right. I hope you can read it. But those uses that are not in the future land use plan are forests, recreation, agriculture, open spaces, aquifer protection, wetland protection, maintenance of forest blocks, wildlife habitat, and habitat connections. And why is it important to show these uses? If they're not on that map, as I mentioned earlier, they might not be incorporated into zoning. They are not considered by Act 250, and they are not considered by the Public Utilities Commission in decisions on siting of electrical or telecommunications facilities. In addition, there is a new law passed just a few months ago, Act 59, which requires an organization called the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to create an inventory of conserved land in Vermont and to develop a conservation plan. About 9% of the land in South Hero is now conserved. Of course, only about a third of the area of South Hero is land. The rest is, as you're all aware, underwater. Vermont Housing Conservation Board's plan will be how to conserve 30% of Vermont's land area by 2030 and 50% by 2050. It's a statewide study, and they are statewide goals. And at the year 2030, we'll be here before the town plan is revised again. The proposed plan will be effective from now for 8 years, which is until 2031. So, if the features omitted from the future land use map have been indicated on the map, that would go a long way to helping define what lands might be more suited to conservation and what lands might be more suited to development under this study that is going to be started. And the town plan recommends conserving additional land, or if it does, then that will show those making the conservation plan that the town supports the conservation goals. The study is not due until the end of 2025. That's 2.5 long years away. I'm not sure why it's going to take that long, but that's what the legislature put into the bill. There will be at least 12 or more public meetings on the plan between now and the end of the period, and it will solicit input from stakeholders, and there are many stakeholders: private owners of forest lands, farmlands, land trusts, conservation organizations, outdoor recreation groups, representatives from historically marginalized, disadvantaged communities, regional planning commissions, municipalities, conservation commissions. And what this really boils down to is there will be opportunities for members of the public to be involved with this, for members of your conservation commission to be involved with this. So if you want to get involved, being on a municipal commission, so you can get in on the municipality stakeholders or the conservation commission. So those are ways to become involved if you so choose. My second topic is location, amount, intensity, and timing of development. The town plan is required to set forth the location, amount, intensity, and appropriate timing of development. The present zoning, which is from 2 years ago, allows almost all uses everywhere within the town with no preferred locations. I acknowledge that location of development here in South Hero is constrained by the availability of lots large enough to accommodate the on-site wastewater treatment systems required by the nature of the soils in the area, as well as to accommodate whatever is going to be built there. And it is unfortunate in this respect, in my opinion, that the wastewater feasibility study is nearing the 60% stage now, which would have helped shape the town plan. That study had originally been scheduled to be due back in November of last year, and there were some changes in, getting permission for test plots and that sort of thing can take time. But the results of the study would have been quite helpful in determining locations, amounts, intensity, and timing of development. Using housing as an example, what population do you want at the end of the 8-year planning period? Where should the housing go? And those kinds of questions. How long until a municipal system is built? I don't find this kind of information in the plan. The concept also applies to public beaches, light industry, stores, other things. My third topic is thank you. I tend to ramble when I don't actually read my script word for word. So, the zoning that will come out of this plan has no guidance on any of these items. It basically allows development, the one you have now, anywhere and any amount of density based on minimum lot sizes. My third topic is consistency with the planning goals. The housing bill now requires towns to be consistent with a set of planning goals. That will be slide 3. This requirement became effective on the 1st of July. Previously, consistency with the goals had been optional. The proposed plan, as I said, will be valid 8 years. That means it could be 8 years until the town plan can be made consistent with the goals. And I'll be talking about 2 of the goals, the numbers 5 and 6 on that slide, in bold italics to make them a little easier to find. And I acknowledge that consistency was not required when the proposed plan was developed, even though it is required now. So not being consistent is not a deficiency in the plan. It's just that the plan was overtaken by something that the legislature did a few months ago. And the plan is consistent with a number of the goals. And as I mentioned, numbers 5 and 6 are to identify, protect, and preserve important natural and historic features of the Vermont landscape, and to maintain and improve the quality of air, water, wildlife, forests, and other land resources. And these 2 tie in with what was not shown or could have been shown on the future land use map in terms of resources, and with the conservation plan with resources that might be conserved, and shaping where the development can go, where it could be conserved, and where development might better be not go because of things that need to be conserved. And being consistent with the goals requires substantial progress toward attainment of the goals. In summary, I have presented 3 areas where omissions in the town plan can impede the ability of the town to guide its future and to direct development away from important resources and toward areas where development will have less of an adverse impact on the human and natural environment of the town. I've covered the future land use map, location, amount, intensity, and timing of development, and consistency with the planning goals. And I'll pause here now to see if there are any questions, comments, or discussion on these or related topics. And after discussion, I plan to continue with aspects related to wastewater. Any questions or comments?
We have 8 minutes, if that. If you have any questions thus far, now is your time.
So, I'm guessing you were asked to give a critique of the current town plan draft.
Yes.
So you know that our town plan runs out very soon. Are we better off voting yes for this, or voting no for this and having no town plan?
Well, there is a way to extend a town plan. So, to extend an existing town plan. So if this is voted down, it's not that you would have...
That's not the question. The question is, are we better off voting this one in at this time? Is this plan better than the old one? And are we better off voting yes on this?
No.
Or voting no and having no town plan?
No, there wouldn't
If
be.
you don't know, it's not a case of having no town... okay, when does the town plan actually expire?
August 10th.
August 10th, so that's really close, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I doubt if you could get a new one done. It's a hard question.
Not for me.
You got to vote on August 1st. Did you vote for this or no?
Delay it.
There's no delay. It's a vote yes or no. As of the 10th, we can't have the select board that we used to pass the old one. We have to have a vote of the people to pass the old one to continue.
Yeah.
So do you vote yes for this or no?
Yes.
We have to hear the rest of the information.
Yeah, so if I could just jump in on that question and we have a little bit of conversation going on. So I'm going to ask that stop.
I just want, he's the expert on this.
I realize that. And by the end of the night, there'll be more information where you folks can make an informed decision. Great question.
I wanted to know his opinion as the professional on a town plan. Should we vote for this one or not vote for it and have no town plan?
There wouldn't be no town plan.
I had not realized that the town plan expires so quickly. It is unfortunate that the select board put the town into the position of either having to accept this or having no town
That's
plan.
great. Yeah, there you
They,
go.
they actually didn't, there was a petition that was put in so that the people have to vote on the town plan. Otherwise, the select board, I'm sure, would have extended the old town plan into the new, into a new timeframe.
Let's
As it's done
extend
many
it
times in our
then.
history. But because of an initiative, the townspeople have to vote on the town plan.
But we don't have to.
Are we, in your professional opinion, better off having this town plan or having no town plan?
My expertise is not with town plans per se. I am commenting on what is in the plan and what is not in the plan.
So,
I understand your question. I would probably vote against this town
and
plan.
have no town plan.
So
I,
if I can, just to keep things moving
so,
here.
no, if I can ask one more question. What are the ramifications of having no town plan? What are the ramifications of having no town plan?
You're not eligible for grants.
I don't have that. You have that information. You're the professional. You said we need it for Act 15. We need it for getting grants. I mean, you're the one that's telling me what we need the town plan for, so I don't know what we have to have. I know our building doesn't stand on many legs without the town plan. That's what we
Can we lower the volume, please?
Were you saying that there were several requirements missing from their plan? Yes.
Yes, I was.
Can you repeat the questions, please?
She asked if I was saying that there are several items that are missing from the town plan, and the answer to that part of the question is yes. I believe there's a follow-up.
So how is it that they can come up with a town plan if there's several requirements missing?
The other part of the question is how can they come up with a town plan if there are several requirements missing? That I do not know. Now, I do know, I come from Montpelier, and in many towns, now let me step back a step. Planning and town plans and zoning are complicated issues. And the people in the towns do the best they can with the information they have to come up with those plans. The Regional Planning Commission has an oversight role or an advisory role in getting these plans right. So I do not know where in this particular case the omissions came in or were not caught. But I do know that, I mean, I showed you the slide of what's supposed to be in the town plan, and I don't know if there's anybody here from your planning commission. Okay, I see a couple hands raised. It's difficult to go through the statutes or the guidance and get everything in there. And I would hope that the Regional Planning Commission had done a better job of catching what was missing.
And we have more time as we progress, but we have time for one extra question. I believe you had your hand raised.
I would think that the select board, being that there are important parts missing from this town plan, that we as residents both know, vote this down, that they will have to take immediate action to rectify the situation. I don't feel that we should have to vote for something that is not up to standard.
And that is basically incomplete.
Right.
Okay. So I've got to keep things moving, folks, and I know there's a lot of questions and comments. We're going to try to get to everybody, but we've got to keep this train moving so we can actually do that. Ed's going to have information that may clarify some of the comments I've already heard. So I'm going to let you move on to your second part, and we'll do other questions after that, as best we can. So we're trying to all be polite, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, thank you, Scott. Thank you for the discussion, comments, and questions. And my next general area will be on wastewater. And my first topic is the status of the wastewater feasibility study. As many of you are aware, the soils in South Carroll that are suited to leach fields and mound systems are limited and mostly coincide with the really good agricultural soils. As a result, the town has commissioned a study to investigate. I'm hearing a little too much feedback. I hope it's not affecting you. Of a municipal wastewater treatment system. My information here comes from the committee's sites on the study. If I have anything wrong, perhaps someone from the Wastewater Commission who has more up-to-date information in the audience and can supplement or correct what I say. 5 sites are being investigated for indirect discharge systems, and for those of you who don't know, an indirect discharge system is one that will treat the wastewater to a high standard and then get treated into the ground by leach fields, spray irrigation, or mound systems. And they're called indirect discharge systems because the treated effluent is distributed into the ground and then eventually reaches the groundwater and eventually gets to the surface water, in this case Lake Champlain. In a direct discharge system, the treated effluent is piped directly into Lake Champlain. The 5 sites that are, I believe they're still being investigated, maybe just completed recently, by the Allen Home Farm, the David Wendell property, Highland Acres, the Davis Hill property, and Camp Tecumseh. Evaluation of soil properties through test pits and evaluation of archaeological resources on these 5 is not yet complete. When that work is completed, the Wastewater Commission will receive a report, and that report should have information on the findings of the test pits and archaeological surveys, whether which of these sites is suitable for a community indirect disposal or treatment system, discharge system. And that report, 60% stage, should include the estimated cost of wastewater systems and design options and wastewater capacities available. It's called a 60% report because typically about 60% of the work needed for the feasibility study is done at this point. And the Commission's schedule calls for a public hearing on that report, and portions of the Allen Home Farm and Island Acres are subject to conservation easements that if they became the site for the system would require amendments to prevent wastewater systems on the property if the system were located there. The town has received a grant of $1,400,000 of American Rescue Plan Act funds to actually help do the design and construction of this system if one is indeed selected. And that would require land purchase before 2024, bond vote by August of next year, final design and permitting by September of next year, and project completion by August of 2026. One other item in the engineer services under the feasibility study includes review the potential for a new community water system as an alternative solution. A well for drinking water can require a separation of 100 or 200 feet from a leach field or mound system. So that takes an acre or 4 acres of land of land that might be suitable for a smaller, individual indirect discharge system, leach fields, mound systems, out of the ability to service wastewater. So if the wells are gone in areas where the soils are suitable, more small systems, individual systems can be put in. And that is part of the plan. As far as I know, it hasn't actually been worked on yet. And if anyone from the Wastewater Commission would like to take a few moments to comment on the status of the study and what might happen in the next few months with it, I think that would help everybody here understand things a little better.
Yes, my name is Peter Zamor, and I'm the chair of the Wastewater Committee. A couple of things. First of all, water supply is not part of this study. There was information requested about water supply in the landowners survey that was conducted to assess how current wastewater systems were doing in the target areas. But the new water supply is outside the scope of the study. Second, I want to say that things are going slowly, primarily because with all the ARPA money coming into the state for wastewater, water treatment, water supply, and other uses, all of the engineering capacity is being used up, and it's been very difficult to get the attention of the engineering support that is needed to move forward. In particular, right now, the 5 test sites that you identified need to be cleared by an archaeological review, first by a consultant working for our engineer, and then second, an archaeological expert for the state. That was supposed to take place in April, then May, then June, then July. I have no idea right now how long that's going to take, but until we have that information, we cannot complete the 60% report, which is really necessary to understand whether or not any wastewater system is feasible. I also want to indicate that there is information on the wastewater committee's site, which is on the town's webpage, including information about what we've done so far, all of the agendas, all of the minutes of the meetings over the last 2 years, as well as summaries of the survey of existing wastewater systems and plans going forward. Finally, I wanted to say that I'm disappointed that we were not able to date to be able to give you more information about what's going on. I felt that it wasn't appropriate to do so until we had these test bits done, because until then, we're really in the dark in terms of what can be done and what can't be done. And therefore, I thought it was premature. But I can assure you that as soon as the test bits are done and the 60% report is completed, we will be scheduling a meeting.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. So thank you, Peter. My second topic is water quality of Lake Champlain, and the scope of services for the feasibility study also includes the potential of including the direct discharge to Lake Champlain. And the work on the feasibility study so far has related to indirect discharge systems, but if a direct discharge system is evaluated, it will be important to consider the implications on water quality. All the waters of Lake Champlain around South Hero, as many of you know, are considered an impaired water by the state of Vermont. They are impaired, all impaired for the same reason. The use of the waters for enjoyment of aesthetic conditions is impaired. The use of waters for swimming and other primary contact recreation, mostly due to the phosphorus and algae blooms resulting from them, are impaired. And the consumption of fish caught from the waters is impaired, mostly due to mercury. These are all large solutions or large problems that require larger solutions than South Hero can implement alone. But they are something where if a direct discharge system is considered, need to be considered. My third topic is effects on zoning of this year's Housing Bill, Act 47. And many of the changes to zoning are based on areas served by municipal sewer and water. And the changes are shown on slide 4. South Hero actually has municipal water in the village areas. Fire districts in Vermont are defined as municipalities. So South Hero Fire District number 4 is a municipality and meets the definition, as far as I can tell, in the law of being a municipal water system. So if there's municipal water from the fire district and municipal sewage from the town, then those areas that have both would fall under the increased densities that are required of areas served by both municipal water and sewer. And I say likely on some of these things because this is a brand new law and people are still trying to figure out how is it actually going to be implemented? What is it? How are we going to actually meet these requirements? But as I said, I believe it can be 2 municipalities, one doing water, one doing sewer. The act will set a maximum number of required parking spaces, which does in areas, one parking space per dwelling unit in areas served by municipal sewer and water, 1.5 spaces in other places. There are some exceptions. A developer may provide more parking spaces, but the Development Review Board cannot require more than the minimum that's in the statute based on what the statute said. There are potential effects of having municipal sewer. The Housing Act automatically makes residential fourplexes a permitted use in zoning districts served by municipal water and sewer that allow residential development. But your zoning already allows that in village districts, whether or not it has municipal water and sewer, and it makes them conditional uses in the rest of the town. So there are a lot of things in Act 47 that your current zoning is out ahead of. Those areas would include making duplexes, allowed uses everywhere. You already do that. Accessory dwelling units, requirements, you're already doing those. Residential density, you're already meeting those requirements, and approval authority for making amendments to the bylaws. The bylaws are set up to do that. South Hero's zoning bylaws do not appear to meet the requirements known as by right zoning. By right zoning is the town cannot place conditions on a permit. For an example, if the maximum building height is 40 feet and the Planning Commission, not the Planning Commission, the Development Review Board says, well, we don't think 40 feet is right for this area. We're going to tell you can build it, but it can't be higher than 30 feet. They will not be allowed to do that anymore. And also with other kinds of changes, setbacks and lot sizes and so on. My fourth and last topic is development between the village districts and the indirect disposal site. I've heard that the sewers will serve the village districts, and most of the sites being investigated, the indirect discharge system will be located outside the village districts. At least one of the sites being investigated is outside the village district and is within, this is the slide 5, is it? That's why. Is outside the village district and within the fire district. So then the question becomes, if the town leaves that as it is, then all of those areas along the sewer line connecting the village district and the indirect discharge system will have both water and sewer available, and they can be developed much more easily. Then the town has a choice in the future of whether to restrict development along that sewer pipe that is outside the village district, and it depends on what the plans are for development in areas outside the village district. The shaded areas down towards the bottom, that's a kind of a sketch of a system similar to what's possible here, are areas that are outside the village district, but that would be allowed to be developed more densely because sewer is available and they don't have to worry about sewage capacity on their own lot. In summary, a municipal wastewater system has the potential to allow more development in South Hero. The potential is not because of the zoning changes in Act 250. The potential is due to the ability to develop on land with soils not suitable for leach fields and mound systems, or on lots too small to have those systems even if the soil is suitable. And as many of you are aware, this will mean denser development, possibly larger housing buildings, larger restaurants, and it will affect the future development in South Hero. And that's what I have to say on that. So again, question?
Before we get into questions, this is up to you as the community. We have a 10-minute break built in between the two speakers. lot of information that just came out, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. If you need to take a break for the next 10 minutes after we're done with Q&A, great. If it's everybody wants to take a break, we'll take a break. But we want to get all this information through and get our questions answered. What's the vibe of our community? Keep going? Okay. So we're going to open it up to questions. And again, raise your hand, be acknowledged. Yes, sir.
Is the forcing function for the wastewater the build-out of the town center? In other words, in the absence of the build-out of the town center and that plan, does the wastewater issue go away?
I don't know the answer to that question. I hope somebody here can.
I don't think that the two are directly related. The study for the wastewater is in response to a state program that encourages towns to look into wastewater capacity and water supply capacity. And it's really not dependent upon the status of zoning in the town.
Other questions? Is that okay? Yeah. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question about the supply of the water for Fire District Number 4. To my knowledge, we're full capacity. We don't have enough units left, according to Ken.
So I'm Ken Little, I'm chair of the Fire District Number 4, and currently we've got a moratorium on connections based on some pressure readings and studies that we did a year ago. We're reevaluating that right now. But based on our state permit, if I do some back of the envelope calculation, if we can address our pressure issues, we've got 26 connections in this.
Thank you.
I have a question. Maybe it's not as necessary, but it's important to me. Is it a requirement from the state that each town...
back here.
I'll repeat later.
Is it a state requirement that each... No. Is it a state requirement? I don't, can they hear me back here now?
A little closer.
I didn't want to get the feedback. If I get it too close, you get a lot of feedback.
Right.
Is it a state requirement that each town has a high-density areas set up in a village that requires it's a 15-foot setback? Is what's been bothering me for a long time, because we have reduced our setback in this town immensely over time. And that's something I want to know if it came from the state or if it's just in the plant. I don't know.
Something planned. Sherry.
The setbacks are left to the towns. There are no state requirements on setback distances. So if the town wants 0 setbacks, I've seen that in some places, like downtown Montpelier, all the buildings have 0 setbacks. Other areas, it's 20, 30, 40 feet. Out in towns equivalents of rural residentials, it might be 50 feet or 100 feet back from the road. As I said, it depends on what the town's vision for itself is.
Thank you.
And it can, of course, vary from district to district.
Thomas? I'd be totally wrong on this, but you mentioned earlier regarding the town plan that there was not any detail regarding the density in these village zones. So we don't know what the plan is for the future of those village zones. Is that correct? Because there's nothing in the plan for us to digest and to know.
The plan doesn't talk about density. The zoning ordinance does the zoning ordinance talks about lot sizes outside the village district, And it talks, and there is no density requirement in the village district. Density is determined by what one has water and sewer capacity for, and by what one can fit in within the setbacks on the lot that one has. But there's nothing that says a certain density is required. The new housing bill does require in areas where there is water and sewer a minimum density of for dwelling units, 5 dwelling units per acre, but it's pretty easy to get a house on 1/7 of an acre and still meet all the setback requirements and the reduced parking requirement and those things. So, but if it's not in the town plan, then it's left up to the planning commission when they develop the zoning regulations. If it's in the town plan, it puts a little constraint on what the planning commission can do.
Do we have another question or two? I think we can do 2 before we move on. So, ma'am, yes, you, please.
Mine's a quick question. It's in the interest, I've been sort of confused by a bunch of this, but in the interest of transparency, are the speakers tonight, are you being paid to present to us?
I am not being paid anything. I have done this because Nancy got my name from somewhere and called me up, and I decided that I could provide some information in the way that I have done it tonight.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
One more question, and then we're going to move on. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Are you currently aware of the sewer allocation available for wastewater in this area? How limited it is?
In terms of the ability to put sewage on existing lots because of the soils?
On existing or any lots in this area? Much of the sewer capacity is used on a piece of property that's across to a lot of this development leads to that location. So my question to you is, understanding that there's very limited capacity to further develop because of the sewer allocation, does the density mean anything, for one? And number 2, are we doing our due diligence to try and look for other future allocations?
I think I'm confused because I think you're using allocation in a way that's different than I am, but I'll answer your question. Yes, I am aware that sewage, the ability to build new sewage systems, leach fields and mound systems, is severely constrained in South Hero. The soils in much of the town, as many of you are aware, those of you who've been trying to build houses, or those of you dealing with failing septic systems know, it's very difficult. So what this study is doing is trying to find areas in the town where the sewage capacity is suitable to provide a condensed system away from the areas, the village districts, where the town plan and the zoning are trying to encourage development. It makes it easier to develop in those areas that don't have soil capacity to build if they've got the sewers out there. The sewers now are basically intended for the village districts.
So I've been pleaded to have one more question, if that's right.
Did I answer your question? Apparently not. Sorry.
So,
don't you feel that there's due diligence on the part of the town, the select board to look for other allocation for sewer?
Yeah, they're looking at it now.
I guess it depends on the vision that the town has for its growth. How much growth do you want? How much sewage capacity do you need? And then go look for it. And what I'm hearing is that there are different opinions on what growth is desirable for South Hero and where it should go. I'll leave it at that.
So on your questions, we're going to fit one little one in, and then we're going to move on to Ed. Keep all these questions in your head, because I'm sure Ed's going to spur some more thought and some more questions for you. We'll have a chance to speak directly with Ed, and then when we're done with that, we're going to get back together as a huddle in a group, and then these folks will be here to hopefully answer everything. We've got to be out of here by 8, so we're trying to do this quick. So, yes, ask your quick question, please.
Thomas, in our discussions, you mentioned that there are 3 ways to disperse the wastewater. So going into a mound system or a leach field. Also, it can be a spray where they do it into the forest. We don't.
Or the field.
Right, or the field. Or, and this is in the wastewater study book, this really shocks me. It said, as a third alternative, into the lake. And they call it surface water dispersal. And that's, so is that, if you can...
We're discussing jargon here, folks. There are indirect discharge systems and direct discharge systems. Treated effluent, put it directly into the lake is a direct system, and that's what Nancy was talking about at the end. When I was talking about the spray irrigation, the mound systems, and the septic systems, the leach fields, those are indirect discharge systems. And the study has been focusing on the 3 indirect discharge system types, but you can't really focus on the type until you know what the soils are like, where you're going to use them. But the direct discharge is an alternative, but I would believe that it would be way down at the bottom of the list and low priority in this case, being on the lake with its impaired waters, phosphorus impairment mostly, that would be affected by a direct discharge. One more question. Quick, please. I'm sorry, I'm not the moderator. You'll have to run it back.
Yeah. So I'm really going to try to keep this on task. Hold on to those questions. You'll have a second chance to ask. And again, Ed, I'm hoping Ed also spurs some creative questions and comments. So why don't we come up? And Ed has, he's another flood person town like me, so thank you for making it. So 30 years of experience sitting right next to me, mostly in the Act 250 information and regulatory process. He's done everything from little tiny shops to the great big huge Stowe thing. And if anybody has seen the Stowe resort, you know that was a whole lot of business. And before that, starting out, he worked for the District 6 Commission in Grand Island, Franklin County, so a little bit closer to home for you folks. And without further ado, this is going to be Ed. And same thing, I believe we have a 20-minute block if you need it. Questions and answers, and then when they're all sort of filtered through, we'll go back to the full panel and you can ask more up until 8 o'clock, where I'll have to put a hard stop to it. And thank you everybody for being so polite. Much appreciated.
I'm really pleased and honored to be here. I live in Barry City, but my family and I love the islands. We come up here all the time. There's hardly any place like it anywhere. And so I'm really glad to help out any way I can. I worked for the state for 30 years, and I figure that the taxpayers paid my salary for 30 years, so I pay back now by doing these pro bono assist for folks around the state that need help sorting out bureaucratic questions and regulatory schemes. So I come for free. And when I worked for Act 250, the last name was Stanek, so when people were nervous or freaking out over Act 250, I'd say, don't panic, call Stanek. So the purpose of my presentation tonight will be to cover how does Act 250 relate to town plans, the importance of town plans for municipal subdivision and zoning bylaws. I have a few comments about, as Thomas touched on, Act 47, what does that mean, at least from my perspective. And also, I wanted to share some experiences I had with municipal wastewater systems as they were designed and went through the regulatory process. And what came out of the pipe, no pun intended, was sometimes very different from what the people who worked on the town were hoping were going to be the outcome. I'll explain that when I get to it. So first off, what is Act 250? In a nutshell, this is not an Act 250 show tonight, so I'll be brief. Act 250 was a law passed in 1970. It's over 50 years old now. When it passed, it was a landmark law. It was recognized not only around the nation, but around parts of the world as really groundbreaking environmental legislation. From the beginning, Act 250 was never, ever intended to replace local review. It was always intended to be hand in glove, working together. Act 250 deals with development. Act 250 deals with subdivision of land. Those are the buzz phrases. When we use the word development, think of commercial, industrial stuff, general stores, dollar stores, medical buildings, stuff like that. That's development. Gravel pits, for example. Subdivision of land in Act 250 generally breaks down to subdividing land into 10 or more lots. In a town which has no local review, it's a lesser standard, but generally the rule of thumb is 10 or more lots. So as I said, it was always intended to be hand in glove with the local review process. Act 250 reviews projects under what are called the 10 criteria. George and others know that if you really look in the statute books, it's more than 10. I think it's 26, because some of them have sub-criteria. But, it's generally criterion 1, air and water pollution. Criterion 2 is going to be a burden on the existing water supply. Criterion 8 deals with aesthetics, wildlife habitat. Criterion 9b is another example, deals with primary agricultural soils. And Criterion 10 deals with town and regional plans. So Criterion 10, the district commission that runs Act 250 for each of the regions has to make a specific finding based on evidence, not how they feel, but on the evidence in the record. Does the project conform with the town plan? Just some facts about South Hero itself. Act 250 divides the world into 1 acre and 10 acre towns. What does that mean? A 10 acre town is a town simply that has both zoning and subdivision regulations. So a town that has both zoning and subdivision regulations is a 10 acre town, and there's less Act 250 jurisdiction. The logic is the town has the maximum local control, and Montpelier doesn't have to be looking over the town's shoulders. By comparison, 1 acre towns are towns which have either just zoning or they have no local review. I ran District 5, which is the 35 towns in Washington and Warren County. There were still some towns, I left state government 10 years ago now, but there were still some towns that had nothing. No zoning, no wastewater ordinance even. I hope in those towns it's changed. Those are 1 acre town, 10 acre towns. South Hero was the 10 acre town. So what does that mean? A couple of quick examples. That means that a commercial or industrial project in South Hero is exempt from Act 250 unless the project is going to be located on a piece of land larger than 10 acres in size. So if someone's building an office building or a supermarket or something like that, and it's on 8 acres of land in South Hero, no Act 250 review. It's exempt from Act 250. If someone's going to open a gravel pit, and all they own, it's not how much is going to be disturbed with the gravel pit, how much land do they own? If they own 3 acres of land, they're going to open a gravel pit in South Hero, no Act 250. If they're going to open a gravel pit on a piece of land that's 15 acres or 100 acres, yes to Act 250. Another thing, and again, this is not a primer on Act 250, but just to give you the lay of the land. Massive confusion in Vermont, and it's the fault of the state for not doing public education for 50 years. But when people need a permit from the state, by golly, it's an Act 250 permit. I can't tell you how many phone calls I got from folks complaining about Act 250 permit. There was no Act 250 permit for the project. It was either an Agency of Natural Resources wastewater permit, it was a building, a public safety building issued by the Department of Labor and Industry. Sometimes it was even an access permit issued by the Agency of Transportation. But in Vermont, people think if you need a permit, it's an Act 250 permit. Incorrect. In fact, the most recent statistics show This is the ballpark number, but the most recent statistics show that only about 30% of all development in Vermont goes through Act 250. Think about that. 70% of all development going on in Vermont is not subject to Act 250 review. So back to your town plan and Act 250. What this means is if a project comes, a developer proposes either a commercial development or a big subdivision in South Hero, they have to prove to the district commission that it conforms with your town plan. Now, the Vermont Supreme Court has said, well, what does a town plan have to have for the purpose of Act 250? They said it has to have specific language. It cannot be just a flowery narrative. It has to be very specific. What are the goals and aspirations of the town? And most importantly, language has to be mandatory. So there's a big difference between using the verb should or could and the verb shall, right? So a good example might be, if your town plan, I'm making up just an example, if the town plan says a development that's going to be located on the shore of the lake should have a buffer of 35 feet, when it gets to Act 250, that's not specific language, that's a waffle word. If a town plan says, if a project near the shore in South Hero is going to be near the lake, shall have a buffer of 35 feet, that's specific and mandatory language. So that's what it's all about. When it gets to Act 250, they go through all the 10 criteria. Criterion 10 is the last, and then they drill down into the details in the town plan. And again, we'll be open for questions about that, but again, this isn't really about Act 250. So the town plan, as Tom has touched upon, is also very important when a town either adopts the zoning and subdivision regulations or when they want to amend the zoning and subdivision regulations. I'm trying to figure out how to be discreet and diplomatic about this, but not all towns are equal, I'll say that. Subdivision and zoning bylaws look really good on paper, but the devil's in the details of how they are administered. Who's on the plan? Who's on the zoning board, right? Do they have a sense of ethics? Does the town have a municipal ethics code? Do they get trained? And a lot of times there's no mandatory requirement for training of the people on the development review boards. I live in Barry City, and my development review board has never seen a variance that they don't love. In fact, I've been at DRB hearings where if the developer's having a hard time, one of the DRB members will say, why don't you ask for variance? Right. And oftentimes they don't meet the criteria. And then there's nobody to appeal, and life just moves on in Barry City. I'm not dumping on Barry. I've lived there for 35 years. I love the place. Not currently, because I live on a hill, no flood. We're getting dust. All that mud dries, so there's toxins floating around. So back to the town plan. The town plan is important for a municipality when it goes to amend its zoning and subdivision regulations. The zoning and subdivision regulations are the regulatory controls on the local level. I've seen countless cases where the state that even in a 10-acre town, they would say, for example, on traffic issues, complicated big project with traffic issues, Act 250 will take care of that. Or they'll have a project where there's going to be impacts on wildlife habitat, such as the deer yard. I don't know if you have any deer yards out here on the island, do you? All right. Well, you might think it's a deer habitat, but the state thinks it's a deer habitat. I think that was an example because classically, even if a town made reference in its bylaws to habitat, they would yield to the state, to Act 250, to take care of that issue. Why? Because the Act 250 commissions by statute have access to the state experts. They can tap into experts in the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Forest and Parks, so on and so forth. So it becomes really difficult for a town, even if they really want to do a good job, if they didn't put money in the budget, how are they going to hire an expert to scope something out? So I come back to what I said before about hand in glove. So a town plan is very important for subdivision regulations and the zoning. I want to shift gears a little bit and say something about Act 47, which was known as S100, but it was moving through the legislature this past legislative session. Full disclosure, I opposed S100. I testified before the Senate and the House Natural Resources Committees. I feel that it's not going to build many more houses. I think it was nothing less than a deregulation bill. It opens the throttle further in the name of building housing. And I can go on at length, but this is not a symposium on Act 47 either. But Act 47 is setting things in motion which I don't think any town really has a clear handle of what the impact is going to be, and Tom has touched upon that a little bit. You know, all these bells and whistles, the bill itself is 75 pages long. As far as I know, no one has produced a summary. The Reader's Digest version doesn't exist. The towns don't know how it's going to play out. Pig in a poke. But I think there's time frames, I'm pretty sure, in there that say for 3 or 4 years. Those time frames are most likely going to be extended because of the flooding, right? A lot of towns are just getting themselves back to where they were 2 weeks ago. So therefore, nobody can wrap their head around, you know, the Act 47 stuff. So I mention that because your town plan, they went through a rigorous process to, you know, draft the plan, have the public meeting, have the warnings you're going to have a vote. This new law took effect on July 1st, right? So none of this was known to your planning commission as they were putting together the town plan. I can only wonder what the implications will be when you layer in, you know, what it is that Act 47 allows or encourages or requires for South Hero. That's not in the current draft town plan because nobody knew, right? The law only took effect a couple of weeks ago. A couple of comments about wastewater systems, municipal wastewater systems. I dealt with several in my career, and again, I was staff to the district commission. I didn't make the substantive decisions. The district commissions are the quasi-judicial panels that make the decisions. We're the support staff for them. But having said that, I was at many hearings when, for example, a huge wastewater disposal system expansion for the town of Stowe, which for the first time was going to provide wastewater treatment outside the village of Stowe. That quaint little village with the steeple, right? That was where the wastewater system was for decades. This proposal was going to run the sewer lines up Route 108 all the way to the Mountain Company. Enormous secondary growth impacts in that case. So I'm putting that out there because right now your study committee, I'm sure, is doing diligent work in terms of the capacity of soils and what have you. But there's all these other heady issues down the road. I'll mention also that municipal projects come under Act 250 review, but only if the municipal project is physically going to disturb 10 or more acres of land. So if a municipal project is only going to disturb 9.9 acres of land, and I saw many site plans with 9.9 acres of land. I thought brain surgeons must be doubling, you know, as land use planners to come up with such exactitude that it's only 9.9 acres of land. So I mention that because who knows at this point if the proposed wastewater system for South Hero would be subject to the Act 250 review. I'm just putting that out there because in addition to the nuts and bolts of soil capacity, what have you, there are very serious secondary growth impacts. We saw this in Stowe, we saw this in the village of Warren, we saw this in the town of Berlin. Again, not all towns are equal. And we know, that local leadership changes over the years. So what I saw in some of these towns, what played out was they had the financing nailed down. Well, 10 years later, not so, right? They realized they were having trouble meeting the loan payments and what have you. So suddenly the areas where the line went past, which were never going to connect, right? And now we started the process of square pegs and round holes because the town needs revenue 10 years later. They started mending this and mending that, and people are connecting to pipes where in the original design was never going to happen. I am not saying that's going to happen here, but it's certainly a possibility to consider. Another thing I want to point out too is in the design stage, there's discussion about whether it's going to be an in-ground system, a mound system, or spray irrigation, but I would not rule out direct discharge. And I'll tell you why. I'm helping folks out up in the Northeast Kingdom dealing with the only landfill in Vermont, which is located a few hundred feet from the shore of Lake Memphremagog. And those folks up there really got up the learning curve because they were extremely anti-regulatory and distrustful of government. Well, they learned, because their ox is being gored, they learned how to use the public document law. And they flushed out, no pun intended here, but they flushed out from the inside the Agency of Natural Resources wheeling and dealings between that agency and the owner of the landfill to possibly come up with an on-site system for direct discharge to the Black River. So there's active encouragement going on by the agency. So I just throw this out there, and I have no reason to believe it. I'm only trying to paint the big picture here, right? That even though local officials may not even be thinking about it or may not want it, if there's no in-ground disposal, the there's no spray irrigation capacity. The state down in Montpelier wants to pack in more development in village areas and what have you. Don't bet the farm that Montpelier is not going to make the suggestion someday, well, let's start thinking about direct discharge to the lake, When I was a bureaucrat, and I was proud to be a bureaucrat, right? I thought Rome and the Greek empires would have collapsed without us bureaucrats running it. But I just feel, where there's a will, there's a way, and for years, the people in the Department of Environmental Conservation, when it came to direct discharges to surface waters, the slogan was, in the back rooms of the cubicles, quote-unquote, dilutions to solutions. Think about that. So, I'm not here at all. I'm an out-of-towner, even Everston I was born as a flatlander. I'm not here to tell you to vote yes or no on the town plan. But I've always living in South Hero because of the unknown implications of Act 47 and the very important wastewater infrastructure questions. We've got the cart in front of the horse here. Not because of anything the Planning Commission or Select Board did, it just happens that way. It's just playing out that way. So...
Can you expand on that? What do you mean?
What do I mean about what?
You got the cart before the horse.
Well, again, they're doing a wastewater study, right? And this town plan is going to take effect if adopted on August 1st. The town plan will be in effect for 8 years going forward. So if you line up with Thomas's outlining the schedule for hopefully designing and constructing the wastewater plant might be in line in 2026, right? So it's right in the middle of the lifespan of the new town plan.
So therefore, I'm sorry, I'm just confused. It sounds like we never had a town plan, and all of a sudden we're having one, and we're doing it too soon because we haven't got all these other studies. The town plan process is continual. And you have to have it on a certain schedule. You don't have the luxury of saying, oh, we're not going to do this yet because we've got other irons in the fire.
Yeah. Well, you can pump the brakes. You can either extend the...
Not in this town.
You can either extend the existing town plan, or you know what? You could even go, without a town plan.
Right.
Because my understanding is, if the town plan expires, it has no negative effect on existing subdivision and zoning bylaws, right? You still have regulatory controls, and then you can...
So what is so wrong with our proposed town plan?
What is so wrong with the town
What
plan?
is so wrong? And is it worse than the one we have now, right now?
I'm not criticizing the content of the town plan. It's a great town plan. I didn't read a sentence in it. I'm a math guy, so I enjoy the maps. A picture's worth 1,000 words.
But I thought that's why we were all here with the mailer. It was about the town plan.
It is about the town plan.
So I'm going to try to bring this a little bit under control.
She invited back for the last time. She gets to talk.
Yep. So we are now officially going into Q&A for Ed, and I have a person back here who is wanting to speak.
I feel like saying to make something that we're here to talk about this something, but here today we're talking about the municipal water system. But I think if I heard Peter correctly, even though $1.5 million has to be used by 2025, 2026, and in reality of that happening, well, there's no way. But I feel like a lot, there's a lot in that campaign, I can everyone's read it, but the amount of time that you're talking about municipal water system, we have to all know the story. It seems like there's so much more in that. There's work to be good. And then you're not going to agree with homes, if ever going to agree with that. But we have to start somewhere. But I just feel like we're having a huge municipal water system.
Please don't let me think.
Yeah, I was just, before the last question, I was thinking, my 2 cents worth is pump the brakes. That's all I'm trying to get to. Pump the brakes on the town plan so that the...
2 years, every Wednesday, first Wednesday and third Wednesday. Anybody can come.
And I'm certainly not criticizing the work of the Planning Commission.
Yes, ma'am. Right there.
Yeah, I'd like to make you aware of a memorandum from the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development, Jacob Henrik, Community Planning and Policy Manager. and Maxwell Primary General Counsel. This is the Reader's Digest version of Act 47, and I have copies here if anybody would like it. I'm surprised you were aware that this was available, because it's been available since, well, June 28th. Yeah. Would anybody like some copies of this?
The Reader's Digest version, Act 47, the Cliff Notes version.
Also, Peter, is there any way in hell that a municipal wastewater system, in your personal opinion, will get passed in this town?
Whether it will be passed?
You have to vote on it, right?
Well, yeah, that's obviously subject to the vote to the extent local financing, which it will be. Because there's a local match requirement for funding, and we'll need to get local funding. But most more importantly, the select board has complete control over it, and they can shut down or study anytime they want. They can do whatever they want in terms of where this goes. We're just trying to gather this money.
So from what Peter just said, you all are empowered to go to a select board meeting and say, please shut down the wastewater study.
We'll be there.
I would love that. It was
We'll be there.
So if we could just, can we do a little bit of a pause here, please? I'm looking for other questions, and I appreciate everybody's comments, but let's leave everybody. I'm just asking for a quick pause where people can be heard because there's other questions. Yes, sir.
Just a comment. I was a teacher for 37 years. And I think the big find is that the young people graduating from our school do a wonderful job of educating. They're wonderful kids. There's no place for them to live. They can't stay in this town. I'd like to see, I just had 2 nieces graduate from Folsom. Chances they'll never be able to afford a house in South Hill the way we're going.
Well, I live here and I can't retire here.
I'd like to see you be able to retire here.
I would love to see me be able to retire here, but the more $1 million houses you keep putting up everywhere.
So I'm going to ask again, one person at a time. It's just like think town meeting, okay?
Sorry.
Think town meeting. Not that I'm your town moderator, but think town meeting.
We kissed the hug. We made up. We're good.
Yes, sir.
So, we need some smaller homes. We got to make it so they're affordable to build, which means smaller lots. I think our kids should be able to stay here, our grandkids. And right now, even our kids who are making decent income out of state, they have to go. That's our biggest export in this state, is our kids. They can't come back. They want to come back. I think that has to be taken into consideration. How are we going to accomplish that?
And we did have a hand up over here someplace. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You'd like to open up the screen around the corner.
And correct me if I'm right on the history. When I first came, I lived in Montpelier for 30 years as well, and was on the city council, school board. But before that, I was in the Attorney General's office, and one of the things that we were encouraged to do, and this is even before A&R was created, is to go up and down the Connecticut River and the Willacy River to encourage municipalities to start straight piping into the river, because there was no system, so the town was just simply dumping in the river. Well, fortunately, under Senator Stafford and other people, tons of millions of dollars came and subsidized all of these municipal plants. That money doesn't exist right now. So my question is that it seems that hydrology is the main issue here of all the issues we're talking about. And I guess, and I'm not speaking for myself, I'm speaking for everybody, I think that to build a sewage treatment plant which will satisfy current owners, the current citizens. And any future expansion would be prohibitive financially. And the people that would pay would obviously the landowners. Do you have any idea as to what we can look at as a possibility to solve that problem? And I'm asking you, and I'd like to hear from both sides as to what their response is.
And before you answer that, I'd like to welcome up Mr. Weiss, if everybody's okay, because we're starting to bleed over with a lot of topics, and I think both panelists would be a good match. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
So we have a half hour of time, a little bit more. So think about your questions. I love debates in the audience, but think town meeting. So let's try to hold the debates down to a little bit and give some respect to our panelists. Thank you. And we had a question over here first.
Well, actually it's a comment, and it kind of went along with what he was saying, that the more that we have, the more taxes we're going to end up paying. The less people are going to be able to live here. And I know that people would like people to come in, especially people who live here, those that are graduating, they would love that. Smaller homes isn't going to mean smaller taxes. It's just going to raise those taxes. So people aren't going to be able to live here regardless. So to have more houses, you need to have more waste. You know, a septic waste system or whatever you call it, wastewater system. And that decision, they don't even know where they want to put it. So it could be way out where no one wants to live anyway because of the land and the soil that's there. So either way, we're going to end up either with no plan or with a plan that's going to have way higher taxes.
Okay. Do you want a response, or is that more of a comment?
It was just more of a comment.
So we have a question right here. Yes, ma'am.
I'm an out-of-towner. My name is Roseanne Greco. I live in South Burlington, and I've been involved in city matters in South Burlington for about 12 years or so, and been through a few city plannings. We're in the midst of our city plan, redoing our city plan right now. One of the questions that I tried to get our city to do, which they haven't done, and I wonder if South Hero has done it, is to identify your endpoint. And by that I mean, what is the endpoint? How many people do you want in South Hero? But it's not necessarily how many you want. It's the carrying capacity. It's the natural resources, which includes sewer and water. And if you don't identify what your capacity is, then if you go with a plan or S100 Act 47, you might end up with more people, houses, and requirement for services than you have the capacity to provide. In some cases, in South Burlington, if you want to see what a city looks like that hasn't really identified the endpoint or the carrying capacity, come to South Burlington, right? We have grown exponentially. I think we're now the second most populous city. So, and what we were told, and what you may be hearing, is that the more housing, the more development you get, the lower your taxes are, because you grow the grand list. Well, let me tell you folks, it doesn't work that way, all right? My taxes have gone up every friggin' year, even though we bring in, at this time, thousands of people. It's called the cost of development. The more people, the more services they require, the more taxes you have to pay to give the services, if you have the money to do it, which drives some people out if they don't have the capacity. That's just the economics of it. But it's the environmental capacity we're not even thinking about. Sewer is a limited capacity. There's only so much crap, a place for your crap, you know. But we don't think about that. And if you don't identify what resources do you have, it sounds like you don't have enough sewer capacity, right? Or you're just going to discharge it in the lake.
Right, the lake needs that.
Right, exactly. So I would really encourage you to identify the endpoint and see if you can make it with all these wonderful plans. And we had it in South Burlington, and we can't. we're going to crash at some point. So I also have experience with city plans, and there's no requirement for a city plan. If you don't have a city plan, then you're not eligible for grants from the state if you get a city plan. It's not catastrophic. So I would say a bad plan is worse than no plan. That's my suggestion.
Very good.
Okay. Who else do I have? Yes, ma'am.
Don't be interrupted.
Yeah, Miranda.
This may be obvious.
Stop. She's in front of the speaker.
She's in front of the speaker.
Oh, the feedback. You want to come up here?
Come up this way.
You're going that way.
I forgot about that.
Jan Dolan, South Hero resident for 27 years now. This may be obvious. Who's going to pay for all of this? Would somebody answer this? Who's going to pay for the wastewater facility? Who's going to pay for new sewers?
We are.
You know, where are our taxes going? It sounds like they're going to the moon.
We're halfway there.
They're going to
Yeah, they are.
Sir.
She's been on it for a while.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't see it, okay.
If the town plan does not conform to the law, do we open ourselves to litigation if we approve of it? That would be.
He's leaving.
So as I understand your question was, if somehow the town plan that is adopted is not consistent with all the statutory requirements, are you open to litigation?
Yeah.
The short answer is I've never heard any town being sued for that purpose. The problem would be in some sort of either Act 250 proceeding, or if you have a zoning bylaw that says, and now references such and such a section of the town plan, there's where the chain would wrap around the axle, because somebody might then point out that the town plan did not meet such and such statutory provision. So as far as being sued, I don't think so. You know, since I'm the guy with the mic, I just wanted to quickly respond to the housing thing, because it's a burning issue for me living in Barry City. But in a nutshell, three things. One, when I testified to the Senate and House Legislators, I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away by how many otherwise full-time residences in this state have been converted to Airbnbs. We're talking thousands. Think that, folks. Thousands of housing units that your family, your kids might be living in today were converted essentially to hotel rooms, right? Because people could get more money renting them out to out-of-staters. And people think that Airbnb, Moses brought it down on the tablets. Airbnb has only been around for 20 years, right? But no one monthly wanted to talk about the fact that, literally, look it up on short-term rental. There's a website, and the statistics right there. Literally, thousands of homes and apartments in Vermont were thrown into the tourist pool rather than for full-time residents. That's
Verbo too now.
What's that?
Verbo.
Yeah, right.
Anywhere.
Right. Comment number two, and I'll be very brief. I was on the Barry City School Board for 6 years, a long time ago. And at that point, we were in charge of what was then called the Voc Tech Center, right? Where the kids would then be trained for trades, carpenters, electricians. Well, this was the shift to the digital age, right? And that was the big push. We were switching digital. A few of us said, wait a minute, what about the future carpenters, electricians? And we got smirks, right? And now it's played out. There's a dire shortage of tradespeople, right? The tradespeople that do exist, where do they go work? They'll go build their houses in Shelburne, right? They follow the money. That's where the money is. So shame on a whole bunch of the government structure in Vermont for 20, 30 years that did not see this coming. We don't have anybody. Just like the town can't find the engineering capacity to finish up the sewer plant, who's going to build all this stuff, right? I'm sort of wondering with the ARPA money, who's going to build all this stuff? And finally, you know, again, living in Barry City, and it's true in St. Johnsbury, it's true in places in Laurel, I'm a big walker around my community, right, in the neighborhoods. Empty building upon empty building. Just sitting there, banks sitting on them, right? Other people sitting on them for a bunch of reasons, not in the housing side, right? No one's doing anything to force them out, you know? I suggest that, you know, the concept of eminent domain should be used. It was used in a very bad way in the 1960s, you know, for the name of urban renewal. But all these empty houses in our communities should be forced into the market, right? The banks have to stop sitting on them. There's hundreds of these units, right? So we're running around, deregulating in Vermont, weakening the regulatory environmental rules to build housing. No one's talking about these other factors. Like I said, I had the microphone, so I had to get that off my chest.
All right, so let's just bring it back a whole. Thank you for that comment. And I'm looking for Peter for the question. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want a mic or no?
No, I just want to respond to George Rice in terms of affording the cost of the wastewater system. Obviously, it can be a big expense, and it's a stretch as to whether or not we'll be able to do it here. But we've got a $1.4 million appropriation from ARPA. We've applied for $1 million from Northern Borders Regional Commission. We've applied for $900,000 from Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and we're likely going to apply for a USDA rural development grant. Even with all that, it may be tough to do. But this is the one time in which these types of things can be done because of all this federal money flowing in. So if it's going to be done at any time, this is the time to do it. And beyond that, there'll have to be a bond vote, and if you think it's too expensive, it's fine. It won't pass.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question. You get your sewage system in. Are you going to force the people that have their own septic systems in our town today, force them to get onto this system?
None of that has been decided. That's up to the select board. I highly doubt that will be forced.
Okay.
There are some places, I know the village of Montgomery set up a special taxing system where if you lived in that, you were required to pay. But I know that other places they have chosen not to do that. Okay. That again would be something that's subject to the select board approval.
Way down the road.
I'm looking for Sandy for the next question. Sandy?
Yes. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Yeah, I'm told I'm loud. Yes. Thank you. I just wanted to make you aware of the consequence of a lapsed town plan. Town cannot amend or adopt zoning bylaws. This basically means the existing zoning bylaws stay in effect. They do not expire, and we can't even amend them with a vote of approval. So you are, for all intents and purposes, would be stuck with, I use that term, stuck with the two village zoning districts that we've heard so much about with zero minimum lot size, which concerns a lot of people. You would be stuck with that. I just want to make you aware of that. And it's already been mentioned that another thing is town would not be eligible for municipal planning grants or Vermont Community Development Program grants. That's not true. So a lot of the deferred maintenance that's going on in town
Asking for so much more.
there could be a loss of potential revenue because the town would not be eligible for those grants. Not for how long? Until we get the town plan.
Well, still it's a year.
So if we could sort of regroup a little bit here again, we have two folks in front of us with a combined history in this whole field of over 60 years. If you have questions on a technical nature or theoretical nature, I can't imagine a better two people to respond to your questions. So anybody else with questions for these folks? Really? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So in your history, have you seen town plans that are this vague before?
Town plans
That are very vague, as vague as this before? And do they have good planning in the end?
Well, that's
The question is, have we seen vague town plans, and then were they able to have good planning as a result?
Yeah.
Well, no. Without the town plan, they had to ship without a rudder, so they would need to work the plan. I did see some towns who were very creative, had a town plan, never could get zoning passed, and they would build language like that into the town plan, and then use criteria 10 of Act 250 to do their zoning reviews through Act 250. So that's a roundabout answer.
So I'm going to do a quick little pause here and with our two panelists who have been eagerly listening to everything you have to say. Responses collectively for our audience on topic. I'll let this go sort of free range between both of you, if you so desire. Yeah.
Oh.
This is being called put on the spot.
It definitely is for some of us. I've given you some information on your town plan, what might have been in your town plan in order to better shape, I won't use the word better, that's a judgment call, in order to more definitely shape the future of your town. For better or worse is an opinion in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. I think that you're in a hard spot here. A municipal wastewater system of some kind, if it is tailored with areas where development could or could not be, will help define the future of the town. And what I'm hearing here is that there is not a common vision for the future of the town, what it should look like in the near future. And town plans last 8 years. They are rarely revised earlier. Someone made a comment about planning being a continuous process. In my experience, it's every 8 years. So if this one is passed, then without a lot of pressure from the community, it will probably stay in effect 8 years. If you're really concerned about not having a town plan and the ramifications, then one can pass it. But if you don't really like what's in the town plan, then one can try, or group, to get it amended before the 8 years are up. So those are kind of my thoughts as from what I've heard here and the response to that.
Well, as I said at the beginning, I think it would be out of place for me to make any suggestions about what you should do with your town plan. I don't live here. But looking at what's that? Again, it's not for me to say what you should do with town plan because I don't live in South Hero. But having said that, looking at it just objectively in terms of process issues, I've said this before, the considerations of what Acts 47 is really going to mean, wastewater, and I understand, well, I'll just leave it at that. Wastewater is enormous infrastructure for a community, and that can have profound impacts on the best planning, unless all the other considerations are put in there. So, I suggest pumping the brakes. That's the best I can say.
Yes.
Are you pointing to me?
No, yes, but someone here has never asked a question.
Hi. So, can everyone hear me? Yes. Yeah. So what I hear both of you saying is that really until we have some kind of wastewater treatment plan, that any other plan that we choose, it's kind of going to be up in the air.
Right.
Because everything for development in this community depends on our wastewater treatment plan. Is that right?
Right.
So why are we voting when we don't have, voting yes on something when we don't have like the most important piece of information? It doesn't make sense.
Yes, sir.
To answer your question, the wastewater flowing
exist unless we vote it into existence. They're going to have to borrow some money to build it.
Right.
We're going to have to vote on it. And the people who are designing it or looking at it, they haven't even decided it's feasible.
Right.
Are going to have to tell us this is why it's good for South Hero. And as you said before, we don't have, and the lady from South Burlington said before, we don't have an end game yet.
Right.
So, since about 10 people do all the volunteer work in this town, my opinion is vote yes on the thing, and then let's all volunteer and do the deep technical work to find out who we want to be when we grow up. And at the end of 4 years or 6 years or 8 years, let's amend this plan to make it what the town wants to be.
So we have a few minutes. Yes, gentleman in the back.
Yeah, so I just want to make very clear that we're not talking about a wastewater treatment plant. We're talking about community septic systems. They are less expensive to operate than if you were to have interspersed individual septic systems throughout the community. We locate them in certain areas because of the applicable soils. For those of you who may or may not know, a lot of the community that was built here is in the septic system across the street too. None of the expense of that system has hit any of the taxpayers on this road. It's all been paid by the developers of the buildings who put these buildings in, who asked for an allocation of sewer to be used for their particular property. So that's not taxpayer money. The only thing we're spending money on, and it's a grant that we're not paying for, is to study new locations within the community. Where could we put community septic, not wastewater treatment, in the community to support growth in 10 to 20. We're at capacity now. We're not building anything more until we find more allocation to septic. And that money is not coming out of taxpayers' pocket. It's coming out of the developers who are building these projects.
So we have another 10 minutes of Q&A. What I would love to hear is from people we haven't heard from yet.
There's a lady over here with a question.
I've spoken, but I just changed positions to try and...
You can't fool me that easy. But you have the floor.
Yeah, I tried. Oh, I can have, okay, cool. A lot of time has been spent here tonight talking about wastewater. And I'm beginning to think, we're really talking... Are we using wastewater discussion to try and steer people to vote no to the town plan? And that's all I can think about is all this wastewater is fear and dread, and so vote no on the town plan. I don't know anything to do with a wastewater.
Well, it should.
So thank you for the question and comment. Ed would like to possibly respond to that.
Sure, Ed. I think the reason wastewater came up this evening is it's essential municipal infrastructure, which is one of the components that every town plan has to address, and that the things that are in motion for wastewater are happening in continuity of time with the adoption of the town plan. But the town plan, which is going to be in effect for 8 years, is going to have a narrative in it relative to wastewater, which is going to be different from what's going to be playing out during the life of the town plan. So it's just a basic infrastructure component that's in every town plan, and without being a broken record, my take on it just seems a little bit like a cart in front of a horse. There's a basic important infrastructure question that hasn't been answered yet, and the plan, and the town is still trying to plan 8 years out.
We have a hand up that I haven't seen before. Yes, sir.
You said.
And here.
Oh, okay. You pointed to me.
Yes.
Ed, you said that at any time during the transition of this 8 years, it could be amended. So with that terminology in there, amended, it isn't set in stone entirely. So if you vote yes for it, it can be amended. You said that yourself. Oh yeah, I heard it.
No, I'm not denying the town plan can be amended. I'm not denying that. No.
Right, so why not vote yes and amend it if you find that things are going to be screwed up? Simple as that.
My simple answer to that is, towns find it so rigorous to get the town plan adopted that they're very reluctant to open the town plan during the life of the town plan. But you're right. Legally, it can be open. Pragmatically speaking, what's the likelihood of that happening? I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Thomas, you highlighted a number of areas that you felt were missing or lacking in the current town plan, the proposed town plan. Is there anything in there that causes you concern on behalf of us as far as being town people? Any major concerns on that list?
Conservation. He asked if I have any concerns about what is not in the town plan that should be in the town plan. And I do have concerns with them because if the things that were omitted from the town plan are included there, then it shapes the zoning. For example, one of the items is agriculture, and the future land use map would indicate what areas the town really wants to support as continuing in agriculture. And if it's in the town plan, then the zoning would work around that and create perhaps an agricultural district instead of a rural residential district. And the zoning would be in the agricultural district would then be directed towards more support of agriculture rather than agriculture being I think it's a permitted use everywhere in the town, or maybe it's permitted and conditional. An allowed use everywhere in town. So that would be an example.
So there are maps which you referenced that you would like very much. There's maps in there that identify finite soils in the community of South Bureau. So I would think that the farmers would be inclined to utilize areas where finite soils are identified. Is there a need for us to identify them further?
What has been identified are the prime agricultural soils. It does not require protection of those soils. It does not require trying to retain those soils for agricultural use. And the existing zoning does not do that. So if one is concerned about loss of agriculture, loss of farms and farming in the town, then having a requirement or a separate agricultural district would support that point of view. If one takes the opinion that farming is on the way out of the town and we need to figure out what's going to succeed it, then it's not important to have that identified. And that's a decision that needs to be made at the town level. I can explain ramifications, but I really can't give you guidance as to how you want South Hero to look or be.
So before we go with your question, is there any other people in the room who have not spoken that would like to ask a question? Yes. And somebody in the back? Yes.
I came basically to find out about the two districts and how they want to enlarge. And if the way they want to enlarge them in the town plan, and I vote for it, am I voting for anything that
down the road.
You know, there's a development that they want to enlarge in these town centers. Are they even going to be able to allow anything to come in with the current wastewater system we have right now? So why are we enlarging them before we support
My comment response to that is, as Ed said, a town plan can be revised or amended within the 8 years, but that rarely happens. So if you increase the size of the village districts now, you won't, and they don't have the sewage capacity now, but they might have the sewage capacity in 2 or 3 years, then you are, because the plant under the funding that they've received, $1,400,000, would require the plant to be operational in 2026. So if one expands the district now, then one is preparing for something that will happen in 2 or 3 years.
Understood. I live, you know, kind of like outside any of the districts, so whatever happens there, I'll be something to have, not to happen. But I live down on Martin Road, and I live across the street. 400 acres, beautiful open land, having conservation. See, I've been a kid, 1965, I was the same property. Granted, it took me 4 years to go through planning and zoning to get my house built for 17 years. Turn down the built house right through the computer. But the 400 acres that have been in conservation, the lady is 96 years old. She's put a last name, and her family are all developers. So what are we voting in to protect that 400 acres? Are we going to